Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by once again. I'm doing this at a different time of day. The lighting isn't quite as what I want it to be, but it's an opportunity I have to sit down and do this, so I will do it. And in regards Costa Rica, some of you, or a few at least, have noticed in recent days there's a lot of concern about the financial situation in Costa Rica. I do want to talk about it because it's really a very serious matter. Now, this has been going on for a long time. I've been following this for years, and it's been very clear that Costa Rica has been living beyond its means substantially. In the late 20th century, or last half of the 20th century, Costa Rica was the place in this part of the world for Americans to retire, and Canadians. They came down here. Those in the southwestern U.S. may have gone to Mexico, but the rest of the country and elsewhere, when I mentioned to people on the East Coast, for example, that I was coming to move down to this in Latin America, they immediately assumed I was going to Costa Rica. That was true. And they were by far and away the leading place, and certainly Panama was not that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So they had the area pretty much to themselves. They developed quite some substantial communities of expats. Remember, this is a different generation of expats than are out there today. So they tended to come together and really form their own very separate communities, which has its good points and its not so good points. But in any event, it became very successful. And they began to realize, in the government, that the draw, the attraction was very much the spectacular wildlife, the plant life, everything that was the environment, the ecology, basically, of Costa Rica. And so they began to develop programs to protect that environment and to also improve the lot of the human beings who lived there, too. They put it all together because it was such an attractive package. And they called it La Pura Vida, the pure life. And it has been their advertising slogan as well as their national philosophy here for a number of years. It was very successful in attracting positive attention from the rest of the world. And in ecotourism, there are very few, I don't think any country in the hemisphere had a better record than Costa Rica for a very long time. And only now are they beginning to, have equally good places to go, but they're a big leader in that. And it became a major source of their income. Not so much the retirees who came down, that started to fade, and Panama started to grow. I have to make it absolutely clear here that the two countries have no problem with each other. They never competed. They're really very different countries. And as I've mentioned in an earlier video, if I remember, I'll put a link to that down underneath. It's a very gentle video comparing Costa Rica to Panama, where I mentioned that there are financial problems there that are quite serious and severe. And a couple other occasions I've mentioned that too. But I've been watching, and finally it's coming to a head. It's going to be changing. Costa Rica will not be the same, and it already is not the same. It's just a question of what it will become, and I'm hoping for the best possible result. Anyhow, here at this peak of their growth in the late 20th century, they developed this concept of La Pura Vida. They advertised it. People responded well to it. We entered into the 21st century. And they developed a welfare system, a social welfare system for their people, a health service and what have you, that really was a step above that which was available. There's nothing that would maybe impress people in your nation if you come from a wealthier nation, but it was certainly impressive in comparison to other Latin American nations. And it seemed to be all working well. But in fact, it started behind the scenes to fall apart. And that, whether that started 20 or 30 years ago, really depends on your outlook. I noticed it about, maybe 10 years ago or so. And I have been all my, 50-some years as an analyst in economic development in nations all over the planet. So I follow this and have followed it all my life. I mean, literally every single day. I follow this on a global basis and in various countries. I don't spend a lot of time focused on Costa Rica, or for that matter, just this section of Latin America, but look at things more globally and regionally. In any event, though, once in a while I stop in to check out Costa Rica, and I noticed, I say about a decade ago, that they were going out for big bucks in one of the major loans that nations require from time to time. Now, typically, as here in Panama, you go for these big loans because you have some major infrastructure project that you're trying to promote. I mean, it may be the expansion of the canal, the expansion of the international airport, the expansion of the road system here, and that sort of thing, the metro system. These are major projects. And you don't mind borrowing the money to do those and paying an interest on them because they're going to pay you back a lot more than it costs to make them. They're very important projects to the economic development of the country. I was gone for a moment or two. I had to take a break here. When the neighbor dog decides that he's upset, then that's what happens. So he's finished now, I hope. But moving along, yes, I noticed in Costa Rica and some of the debt they were getting into at the time, this is major international debt, the kind that governments buy in major institutions and so forth and what have you, in terms of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. Typically, these are used for the purposes of investment for projects that are going to pay off big time, that are very expensive to get started. In this instance, Costa Rica, the one I was looking at the time, a good share of it, half of it or something, was going to go to pay for current expenses. Oh boy, is that ever a red flag. Now, governments are normally expected to pay for their standard current expenses, that is salaries and whatever the phone system is, rent for any offices, that all the stuff, the benefits packages, the whole operation of the government itself. Those are operating expenses. They're not investments in the future, they're operating expenses. And here they were in the international markets borrowing large sums of money to pay operating expenses. And I just thought, whoa, that is so dangerous. You don't want to do that very long. You need to get away from that. You need to make some changes so that you can get back in control of your own spending. And above all, you're the one that's paying those bills. So when you go to lenders and ask for money, it's not to pay for operating expenses, it's to pay for investment that is going to bring you enough money to pay them back. It's pretty logical. Any event, to make a very long story short, it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And their investment grade, and it ceased to be investment grade, it's risk rating, and it fell into the junk bond category, continue to fall. Ours was rising at the same time. There's a very big distance between these, Panama and Costa Rica, in terms of how the rest of the world sees them from a risk viewpoint. And finally, what happens? Well, usually when you get yourself into a situation as dangerous as the one that Costa Rica was in, and it's been there for at least a decade, and you haven't actually been able to do anything to stop it, it just keeps getting worse. Usually you have to have an accident that's very bad. Something comes in that just happens, and that's called the pandemic. And that happened last year, and so when they talk about the pandemic being the thing that the problem Costa Rica faces, the problem is much deeper than that. But now we're at a point where they're under terrific stress, and they cannot borrow money in the private markets without paying a ridiculously high, stupidly high interest rate. It's not stupid from the viewpoint of the people handing out the money. It's the best they can do with the poor record that Costa Rica has at the moment and its poor prospects currently and for the foreseeable future. So they know that, of course. And so Costa Rica has approached the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which is set up by the so-called wealthy nations with funds that can be loaned to countries like Costa Rica to get them through periods like this. But in order to access the funds, the government has to sit down with the IMF and make a plan. And it's a pretty detailed plan of what they're going to do over the next few years to meet current problems, to get back in control of their own financial situation and raise economic activity to a point where they can begin to service their own debt and grow again and get through this. It sounds all terribly easy. It isn't. It's extremely difficult. And they started that process about mid-year last year. They came up with a package, and the president presented that to the people of Costa Rica, and boom, everything went to the ceiling. Labor unions did not like it. A lot of people, the working class, didn't like it in general. What he had done, very simply, was raise a lot of taxes and fees. That's how it was seen, at least. And in order to avoid cutting services, I would suspect, whatever. The reaction was very negative, and people didn't like it one bit, and there's a lot of trouble associated with it. Finally, the government has gone through a series of efforts over the last few months to try to get this worked out peaceably with people, and they have looked for suggestions. They've really done everything they can do to bring in every segment of Costa Rican society to try to find something that's going to satisfy or equally dissatisfy everybody that they can put forward. People know it's a serious matter, and they want to deal with it, but it's tough. It's tough when you're in a situation like that, and I have sympathy for them. I recognize they got themselves into it, and their leadership knew it. But nobody, it's easy to blame the leaders, but believe me, the people weren't out there saying, please hurt us, please take our money from us, please reduce our services. We don't do that. Everybody in the nation has to take responsibility, but this is where they're at this point in time. And they came together, and they have now another plan. They have presented to people, and they're presenting to the IMF. As far as I know right now, they should be in meetings with the International Monetary Fund. I expect that they will continue for some time to come, and so forth, and we'll see what comes out of it. But what are the three ways that they're looking at the moment at trying to raise sufficient income to make a really big difference? Hold on to your hats. For those of you who are believers in La Pura Vida and the strong environmental push of Costa Rica, which is beautiful thing to hear. Well, one of them is open pit mining, gold specifically. The second one is fracking for oil, offshore fracking and oil fracking into the ocean. Those are two major projects. Not only are they huge projects, not only would it take some time before the income started coming in, assuming it does, but more to the point, nothing is probably going to upset environmentalists more than two projects like that. And yet there we go. And so much for La Pura Vida. I'm sorry, but it just completely runs against what they have been preaching for decades. The third one that they have discussed that I'm aware of, God knows there may be others, but anyhow, these are enough, is to change from territorial to global income for tax purposes. As you know, some of you know, in Panama, if you earn income in Panama, you pay income taxes on the income earned here, but you don't pay it on anything earned outside Panama at all. And it's exactly the same way in Costa Rica. Well, Costa Rica is now considered, submitted the idea that they will now also do the same thing that basically the United States does, which is charge taxes against income earned anywhere in the world. Now, the details of exactly which classes of income will be taxed and so on, I don't have all that information. I'm not going to try to track it all down because it will change over and over again. Bloomberg suggested up to 27.5% tax is the maximum rate on global income. Well, yeah, that's going to have a major impact on if you can do it, pull it off, so to speak, and people are honest. You can bring in a lot of money that way. All three have one thing in common. They're going to be highly controversial. They're going to face very powerful opposition. The global income tax one already looks like it's dead because representatives of three of the parties in the National or the Legislative Assembly who represent 30 of the 57 delegates said they will not support it. So if they don't, it's not going to be in the final agreement if they stick to it. But we're at the early beginning period. We have other things that are being discussed. They have other things being discussed too, such as special surcharges on properties that are considered to be luxury properties. $327,000, my note says, $327K or higher. That sort of routine. They already have a surcharge there, but they're going to have a higher one apparently. I don't know. And neither do you, and neither do they. This is an ongoing situation. So what is the final analysis? What are we talking about here? I'm telling you this not because it's an issue here in Panama. It is not. Not at all. But because many of you write me and telling me how you're interested in Costa Rica as well, you plan on visiting there and looking, and I always say, fine, I mean, great. I'm not, Panama can stand its own 2 feet. It doesn't need to be frightened that you will see something a lot better in another country. You might, and if so, fine, you found your place. But we don't have to worry about that. I certainly don't. So I have never suggested that people should avoid Costa Rica. That's ridiculous. It always has been. Today I wouldn't avoid them so much as I simply, well, yeah, I would. I would say I will be back when you know what you're going to be doing. When an agreement's signed, you've got it figured out, or you defaulted, or whatever the story is, not only what it is going to impact me directly, should it be a matter of taxes, or should it be a matter of just upsetting me in terms of the La Pura Vida, not getting what I was hoping I would find in your nation, but also, of course, how the people in the country respond to it, especially, if things are difficult. Yeah. No, I would strongly recommend you just wait. It's as simple as that. They are pushing hard. I can see the activity. They are pulling out every stop, trying to get interest here, to try to draw people, to attract people for retirement, what have you, while they still can, before this becomes widespread. Now it's just moving quickly. And although a lot of it is inaccurate, I read some of the stuff here and I go, oh boy. Anyhow, the fact of the matter is that it's underway. And everybody will be looking at Costa Rica. But if you are headed there and you've got your ticket or whatever, you're going to be popping into San Jose, you have questions you need to ask. And you need assurances you need to get to some extent. I mean, whatever they can tell you and whatever you can get. It's as simple as that. So, I'm sorry to have to talk about that. I look forward to coming back to talk about Panama again. I don't intend to talk about Costa Rica until such time as there's a really significant reason to do so. And when they make an announcement, fine, I can share that with you. Otherwise, I want to get back to Panama. However, for this case, in the description below this video, I will add some URLs to various and sundry news sources. I'm not recommending one over the other or what have you, endorsing anybody's viewpoint, but a few of them to give you an idea of what other people are reading at the present time. So enough for that. I look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you for stopping by this time. And if you haven't subscribed, think about it. And if you do, you'll get notification of new videos as they come out. Thanks again.